Excuse me, members of the committee. Just to say, there is apparently an item in the members' room relating to one of the applications for tonight, if you haven't had a chance to go in and look yet. Thank you. Hello and good evening. So welcome to this meeting of the Planning Committee, including those watching online. If the fire alarm is activated, please vacate the offices via the stairs, either through the security door to my right or opposite the lifts in the foyer. Please do not use the lifts. Please assemble in Hawley Square on the green. Officers will assist and advise when it is deemed safe to return to the chamber. Does anyone intend to film or record audio of the meeting? No. I would advise that if filming takes place, anyone in attendance in the public areas may have their image captured. I urge anyone filming proceedings to avoid filming members of the public, particularly if there are children present. Any speakers using the microphones in the middle may be picked up by the cameras recording the meeting, and members of the public in the public gallery behind them may have their image captured. Would everyone present please ensure their mobile phones are turned to silent and that they are not used to make or receive phone calls or messages in the chamber whilst this meeting is in progress. I have the following members who wish to speak under Council Procedure Rule 20.1. Item 5F, Councillor Bright, and Item 5G, Councillor Manners. Would any other members who wish to speak under Council Procedure Rule 20.1 please announce it now? Thank you. I have apologies from Councillor Dennis, Councillor Moore, Councillor Green, substituted by Councillor Huxley, and Councillor Packman. Are there any other apologies? No. Are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Alban, Councillor Bright.
If I may speak for myself and my fellow Cabinet members, Chair.
Yeah.
Must declare an interest in items 5C, 5D, 5F, 5H and item 6. Because we are Cabinet members and therefore these are, Thanet District Council has an interest in the application, so we can't take part in the debate. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on, do members agree that the minutes of the extraordinary Planning Committee meeting held on the 16th of April 2025 be approved as a correct record? And can I have a proposer? Councillor Alban, seconder, Councillor Bright. Everyone agree? Thank you. And do members agree that the minutes of the Planning Committee meeting held on the 23rd of April 2025 be approved as a correct record? A proposer, please. Councillor Alban, seconder. Councillor Boyd, thank you. Do members agree? Thank you. Any site visits will take place for committee members on the morning of Friday, the 6th of June. And now for a point of information, I will hand over to the Planning Applications Manager who will update on two applications, items 5A, the Oval, and 5H, the public conveniences. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. For agenda item 5A, the Oval, Council has received an additional document, design justification report, subsequent to the publishing of the agenda, which includes details of the method of fixing of the cladding to the existing shipping containers on the site and the proposed containers. Insofar as the document relates to the cladding, the officer recommended wording for the new condition 3 at the top of the report is updated to state that the external cladding on the shipping containers already in situ as set out in Appendix 1 received on the 20th of June 2024 and design justification report received 20th of May 2025 shall be carried out within 12 months of the decision date, and the ground is the same. For agenda item 5H, public conveniences, the recommendation in the published report is to defer and delegate the application for approval, subject to Natural England raising no objection to the appropriate assessment at Annex 1 and the safeguarding conditions outlined. Subsequent to the publishing of the committee agenda, Natural England have confirmed that they have no objection to the appropriate assessment at Annex 1, and therefore the officer recommendation is updated, now being for members to approve the application subject to the safeguarding conditions outlined in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So, moving on to the items for public speaking. The first item is agenda item 5A, application for approval, the Oval Bandstand. Public speaking in favour of the application, Mr. Simon Bell. You have 3 minutes.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. I represent Grass Cliftonville CIC, the not-for-profit community organisation that has managed the Oval Bandstand and Lawns since it was transferred from the Council in 2021. We're asking you to approve the variation of several conditions attached to our previously approved planning application, which received unanimous support from this committee last September. These are not changes to the nature or ambition of the project. They are practical adjustments that reflect the reality of delivering a major community-led regeneration with limited resources. Our application proposes removing the temporary status of the shipping container retail units, which are essential for generating sustainable income to support free and subsidised events and maintain the site. We're also seeking more realistic timeframes for completing the cladding, installing seed-in roofs, and submitting our landscaping and lighting plans, all of which require specialist input, structural design and external grant funding. We're requesting permission for low-level indoor music within our new cafe space while retaining the existing restriction on external speakers. And we're asking to clarify the essential security lighting can remain on overnight to deter antisocial behaviour, an issue we've had to manage repeatedly at the site. We understand the Conservation Officer recently requested additional design details for the containers. These were submitted last week and are included in the documents before you this evening. We've worked with a structural engineer and are fully committed to delivering those visual and ecological improvements in full compliance with planning policy. We're grateful that the officer's report supports all the proposed variations. It acknowledges the modest and measured nature of the changes and the very real community benefit the Oval delivers through its self-sustaining business model. Since taking on the Oval, Grass has welcomed over 16,000 visitors a year, hosted more than 150 community events and dozens of wellness classes, planted over 400 metres of multi-species hedgerow, reinstated historic flower beds, established wildflower meadows, launched our new ecology hub and begun work on a free-to-use outdoor gym and wellness garden. We fully refurbished and upgraded the Oval Pavilion, are about to open a new cafe and ice cream kiosk, and have created much needed jobs and training opportunities for young people in Thanet, all while supporting thousands of local performers, traders and volunteers through our vibrant programme of events. These variations aren't about cutting corners, they're about ensuring a community organisation can continue delivering for Cliftonville, sustainably, responsibly and with long-term impact. Thank you for your time and I hope you'll support the officer's recommendation to approve.
Thank you. The Principal Planning Officer will now outline the report.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the application site outlined in red and an aerial view of the application site. Some members may recall considering the application, well, the previous application for the site at committee in September last year. A variety of uses were approved at that meeting. They included a cafe, the creation of an events venue with shops and concessions, a wellness garden and outdoor gym. So this is the plan that was approved at that meeting. So you have, for example, the wellness garden here, the amphitheatre in this location here. And as has been mentioned, this application seeks to vary several conditions that were imposed on the previous application. The variations of conditions 4, 7, 8 and 11 essentially seek to agree longer timescales for details for conditions to be submitted for approval or works to be carried out, for example, the cladding of the shipping containers. The additional periods that have been requested are not considered to be excessive, and it is considered, no objection is raised to the proposed variation of those conditions. So 4, 7, 8 and 11, we are looking to recommend approval for those variations. So condition 3 of the previous consent related to the shipping containers and fencing, the Harris fencing you can see an example of in this photograph here, and gave them a temporary consent until the 31st December 2026, after which the containers and the fencing were to be removed. This application seeks to vary that condition so that it relates only to the fencing. So it would allow, if agreed, that the shipping containers would remain on site, albeit they would be timber clad in the future as secured by condition 4 of the previous consent. So you can see here an example of a shipping container that is in situ, and it is obviously by its very nature evidently a shipping container. And it is considered, this is an example of the type of cladding that is expected, so it would be wooden clad. The Conservation Officer has raised some concerns regarding this condition and the amendments now requested, but it is, however, recognised from the debate on the previous application that members did accept that cladding of these containers would assist in minimising the visual impacts and the impact on the conservation area setting, and that the containers do occupy a limited part of the site. So on balance, given this and the fact that there would be economic benefits for the applicants of not having to replace the containers, but merely to clad them, it is considered that this variation can be supported. So, condition 9 of the previous consent, as has been mentioned, prohibited music, amplified and non-amplified, in any concession or structure. This application seeks to vary this to allow music within the cafe, but not externally. Environmental Health have been consulted, and they find this variation acceptable when combined with, given the distance to residential properties and the hours of opening that were secured. The cafes and other structures on the site are generally small scale, and as such it's not considered that this variation, given the support from Environmental Health, would be harmful to the residential amenity of surrounding occupiers. Condition 10 of the previous consent relates to the use of all concessions, bars, kiosks, a cafe and the amphitheatre, and restricted their use to 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Wednesdays to Sundays between October and March, so the sort of winter period, and between 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. all week in the summer period, but so between April and September. This application would seek to vary this to allow the operation of all the concessions, the bar, the kiosk and cafe, to 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. throughout the year. It does not include the amphitheatre in that variation. Again, Environmental Health reviewed the application and raised no objection to the proposed amendment to this condition, subject again to the opening hours being as set out in this variation, and the fact that it is some distance from surrounding residential properties. So it is considered on balance that the proposed variations of conditions set out in the application are acceptable, and the officer recommendation is for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. I move that the officer's recommendation is adopted. Would the Vice Chair please second?
Seconded.
And do I have any speakers? Councillor Keane.
Thank you. I called in this application because we had discussed it quite fully at the previous planning meeting, and I felt it was right that we should have the full facts of the updated proposals as well. I certainly don't have any problem with it. I know the Oval is a valued local amenity, and I think we should do all we can to support them in making it a success, and I think things like the opening hours help that. One of the concerns I had previously was about the shipping containers, but when we saw the photos with the cladding as we did just now, I think they look quite attractive. I don't think they detract at all from the area. My only questions are when the cladding would be done. I may have missed the date in the report for that, but I didn't see what the date was now. And also, I did note that there was comments about the lighting and making sure it didn't affect people. Now, I have heard, although obviously they haven't made any official complaint about it, or it would have been noted in the report, but I have heard from a resident of Queen's Court about the lights being very bright. So, sort of, it seems to be covered fully in the conditions attached to this, so hopefully that wouldn't be a problem. Thank you.
Councillor Matterface. Oh,
Yes,
hang on a minute. We're going to come back on the question. Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry, condition 4 is the one that covers the cladding, and it previously was to be done within 4 months of the date of the last previous consent, but they're now seeking to extend that period, so 12 months of the decision date. So it would still come forward. In terms of the lighting, that's condition 11, I think, and yeah, so it has to be agreed. So if we are unhappy with it, we can say so when the condition details come in.
Sorry, Councillor Matterface.
All right, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask how far it actually is to Queen's Court, because Mrs. Hemming's talking about the music, and it's not that far. I just wondered, do we have any idea of the distance between where the music's going to be played and the flats in Queen's Court? Because they are, in my opinion, quite close. So I just wondered if you can give me that info.
I think the nearest residential property, and I think it probably is Queen's Court, is about 60 metres from the cafe building. Right. And it would be internal structures that have the music rather than external.
I mean, you said there'd be no outside speakers, but if the doors are open to the cafe, then depending on the level of the music inside, that could obviously travel, because music does travel if there's open doors, open windows. So 60 metres, that seems a fair distance. Thank you.
Councillor Wing.
I mean, having seen the benefit of the introduction of a cafe into Ellington Park and the massive positive impact it's had on that park, which is in my ward, then I think this is a massive asset for Cliftonville. And because it's going to have concessions, it's going to be sustainable. And, you know, I think I love shipping containers, and cladding that with wood looks a damn sight more attractive than the Turner does. So yeah, we need to massively support this, because it's a huge asset. It's going to be a huge asset for the local people.
Councillor Rattigan.
I just reflect on what Councillor Wing said. Being in my ward and living in that ward, it's it's a great asset. And so the shipping container idea, folks on the seafront have done it down there. It's a more economic way of doing it for business, and yeah, I'd fully support it.
Anyone else? Councillor Orban.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just would like to see if we can get a shipping container for Councillor Wing. If she wants to move out of her house in Ramsgate, I would help her move into a container there. But I think all the members have said everything. It is something that we should be supporting, and it's something that obviously, as the gentleman said, 16,000 visitors. It's brilliant, and it's great across the whole of the island at the moment. So I will support this. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Makinson.
I would quite like to see the actual shipping container clad rather than an example, because I know from experience, I've never lived in one, but I know they're difficult to put windows in wherever you want. And that would not work, that picture, with all those windows in it. So perhaps they could submit what it's going to look like. Thank you.
Do I have any other members wishing to speak? In that case, I move that the officer's recommendation is adopted. Would the Vice Chair? No? Wrong one. I've done it again. I've not ticked my little boxes to say that I've already said that. Let me go down. We will now put the motion for the officer's recommendation for approval to the vote. All those in favour, please show. And I think there's no one against. Thank you. Sorry about that. So the motion is carried. That means we're moving on to agenda item 5B, application for approval, item AO2, National Westminster Bank, High Street, Ramsgate. Speaking in favour of the application, Mr. Alistair Cross, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. This statement seeks the Council's support for the change of use for the vacant NatWest Bank at the corner of Hardress Street and High Street. This project seeks to deliver 6 new town centre homes and a well-proportioned commercial unit. The applicant, ArcVelop, may be familiar to members, having successfully delivered a number of development projects in Ramsgate in the recent years, including a high-profile site in Albion Place, now nearing completion. We are heavily invested in the success of Ramsgate, and as a design-led company, we recognise the character and history of the NatWest building and are committed to the delivery of a high-quality, sensitive development. Traditionally, high street banks would seek prominent locations and use of grand architecture to display their prominence. However, the growth of the digital services have meant banks require smaller operating spaces and fewer physical branches. In this case, there is little prospect of this building returning to its former use. In terms of alternative commercial uses of the building, Arcvelop and Miles & Bar estate agents have collated a retail occupancy survey of which evidences large commercial units in the area to be difficult to let. The proposed 61 square metre commercial unit retains the prominent high street frontage, offering an attractive, flexible space suitable for a range of uses, with Miles & Bar estate agents anticipating strong interest with the proposed layout. At pre-application stage, officers advised focused on policy SP11 and its support for regeneration first and foremost, with the aim of bringing commercial development back to the heart of Ramsgate and residential development to the periphery. A small section of the front facade is located on a secondary high street frontage, which allows for other uses on the ground floor other than commercial. The remaining frontage on Hardress Street is on an undesignated zone, therefore separating off from the high street. Residential dwellings are the typical typology on the corner of Hardress Street onwards and would be considered appropriate to follow this arrangement on the street. However, with this specific context and prominence of the historic structure, it is considered highly appropriate to keep the commercial frontage and usage on the high street and its corner elevation, with the residential use to be facilitated along Hardress Street and the upper floors. There are no changes to the building's massing or front-facing elevations, only sensitive restorations and reinstatements of lost heritage features, including the brass signage wrapping around the building. Internally, flats meet all space standards and are arranged to maximise internal daylight and provide quality accommodation that is considerate of its central location. The Council's Conservation Officer commented that the proposal strikes a positive balance between heritage preservation and viable reuse, and that the detailing would provide the building with a positive condition and help tell its story. Operationally, there would be minimal impact on the local infrastructure. It is a car-free development with secure cycle storage in a highly sustainable location, meaning no new vehicle movements or parking pressure. Waste collection arrangements will be as existing, with the private collection for the commercial unit and the communal waste storage for the residential dwellings prior to the transfer on Hardress Street on collection day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The Principal Planning Officer will now outline the report.
Thank you, Chair. This is the site outlined in red here. So this is the High Street running along here, and this is Hardress Street here. So it's on the corner of the two. This is just an aerial view of the site and another view showing the building. So it's within the conservation area and it's a Grade 2 listed building. This is just showing the policy designation of the site. So this is the site on this corner here. So the front part onto the High Street lies within the secondary frontage of the primary shopping area. This is the existing building. So the building runs along Hardress Street here up to this point here, and then extends along the High Street up to this point here. And then just a closer view of the view from Hardress Street. And then again, this is also from Hardress Street. So you could just see this door here would lead to the refuse store and cycle store as part of the development. And then again, this here showing the rear of the building, and then just a closer view of the windows. So you can see they're quite interesting windows within the listed building. We're very keen to see these retained. You can see they currently have obscure screening within the windows at the moment. And then this is the rear elevation of the building. So this is the main rear elevation, and this is the part on the left that wraps around fronting Hardress Street. So this part here is fronting the High Street. And then this is just an internal view of the building, just to show the space. So this is an internal wall. So beyond this space is part of the building as well. So you can just see through this gap here. So it's this full frontage beyond this wall here. And then it comes back, and you can see the two windows on the left that are part of the arched windows. So the proposal, whilst the listed building hasn't come before members tonight, internally that would involve the loss of that entrance there, and this area here would now be the commercial. So the application originally came in for a fully residential scheme, and the amendment to the scheme now allows for this space to be commercial. So the commercial area extends to the front here and beyond that wall, which will be going, so it extends into that area here, and then this closest window, that's the line dividing the residential use. So in terms of external changes, there aren't really any real changes occurring. It's just mainly refurbishment of the existing windows. So all of the windows are staying as they are. There's just some change into the glazing, again, to remove the obscure glazing on some of these frontage windows and to put back some of the original railings into the front of the windows, and to deal with some of the signage at the top here, to introduce signage that is in keeping with the existing fascia. This is the view onto Hardress Street. So again, this is existing, and then this is the proposed. So again, you can see it's basically identical. There's some replacement of doors, but these would be just timber replacements. And you can see within this side here, so in terms of the uses, this area here would be residential at ground floor level. This window here would also serve residential, and then this would be the commercial, along with these two windows here serving the commercial unit. And then this is just the existing rear elevation and proposed, so again no alterations there, and then the side elevation, and again no alterations there. So in terms of the actual internal layout at basement level, the proposal is to have part of one of the residential units. So the proposal as a whole is for 6 flats. One of those is 3 bed, one's 2 bed, and 4 are 1 bed. So there's a flat that extends from basement level up to ground floor level. Originally, the plan showed some bedrooms within the basement level, but there is limited light into the basement, so that's now been amended. So this shows a kitchen area and a utility area and a bathroom, so all non-habitable rooms within the basement space. And then this is existing ground floor and then proposed ground floor. So then that flat links up with part of the ground floor, and then there's also and then this provides the three bed unit in total between the ground and basement floor. And then to the front here you can see the commercial space. So the use of this space isn't changing. So at the moment it's formerly a bank use, which falls within Class E. And that would just be retained as Class E. So this commercial use could be used for anything falling within Class E, which is considered as town centre uses. At the moment, there's no plan shown for anything related to extraction, so no flues or anything is shown, so they wouldn't be able to do a takeaway use or potentially a restaurant use without coming in for an additional application for that. But at the moment, it could be used for anything else falling within use Class E, including retail, offices or potentially cafe use. So you can see towards the rear here, this is the door that you saw in the photo that leads to the refuge store at the rear of the building, and then the cycle store is in this location here. In terms of the flat, these are the bedrooms, so they all would have windows fronting onto Hardress Street, and again the living room that would use one of the arched windows as well. So in order to protect privacy, there would be some obscure glazing of the lower part of the windows onto Hardress Street. And then at first floor level, there's 3 one-bed flats proposed. So this is one flat on the left here that extends along here, and then one down here in the corner, and then one along here. So a number of the existing structural walls are being retained in order to sort of allow for this this configuration. All of the units do meet the space standards. There was one that fell slightly short, but that's been amended. An ensuite has been removed in order to make the floor space meet the space standards, so they all achieve that now. And again, in terms of windows, you can see that all of them have windows facing onto either Hardress Street or High Street, with the only other window being this one at the rear here, which would face into this rear space, as you saw in the photo earlier. And then the second floor level, this would be a single one-bed unit here in this corner, and then a 2-bed unit again here. This one would have a replacement of a window to a door into some amenity space in this location, so a very small roof terrace, which would have an obscure glazed screen around the outside to protect privacy, but none of this is visible from outside of the area. So in terms of the proposal, it lies within the secondary frontage, so in principle residential could be provided at ground floor level. However, the policy does say that that's subject to there not being any fragmentation of the commercial frontage within the town centre. It's quite a large building, so it was felt that there could be some impact on that. Also, being listed, we are keen to retain commercial at ground floor level, so everybody could appreciate the internal decorations of the building and try to reduce the subdivision of the building as much as possible. So again, just going back to here, so all of this would remain open, and again, you saw from the photos that there's quite a lot of decoration at ceiling level, so all of that would be visible and retained. So it is supported that there is an element of commercial at ground floor level. In terms of the size, it was suggested that maybe we could try and get a larger commercial unit that took into account this additional arch window, but the evidence that's come through from the estate agents is showing that actually commercial units of this size are more desirable, and it would be less viable to go for a larger unit. But that's fine. That's not sort of a problem with the policy. We are still achieving that in the main significant part of the listed building. So that achieves 61 square metres of commercial space. As mentioned, it's in the conservation area and listed, but the Conservation Officer has raised no concerns because there are very limited changes externally to the building. In terms of impact on future occupiers, and there's conditions regarding a noise impact assessment to be submitted to make sure that any future commercial use wouldn't impact on the living conditions of the flats, either to the rear or above or below the unit. And a UU has been submitted securing the SPA contribution for the additional units, and therefore it's recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. I move that the officer's recommendation is adopted. Would the Vice Chair please second?
Seconded.
And I will tick my boxes this time, and I've got Councillor Alban wanting to speak first.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think what's important here is that Ramsgate High Street has one of the highest amount of empty shops, commercial premises in the whole of Kent. And a building of this stature, this size, would be very hard to fill it completely. So there has to be some kind of other option, and I think that this fills that option. Not only is there a 3-bed flat, there's a 2-bed flat, but importantly, there are 4 one-bedroom flats, of which we need. If my hearing was right, and the applicant is the same people who have done the work up at Albion Place next to the Albion Hotel, everybody that I know has been extremely supportive of the work that the company has done there. Personally, I think it's one of the best buildings that we've had in Ramsgate for some time, and if the same quality is carried out with this, Ramsgate is a winner. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Matterface.
Thank you, Chair. I've just got a couple of questions relating to the windows. It says condition 6, and it's been referred to the 3 lower window panes. Could you go back to the photographs, please, of the windows as they are at the minute, so I can compare? I think you said, did you say the upper panes at the moment are obscured glass, and these would be the lower panes? I think you said the upper panes are obscured, and these would be the lower ones. Is that right?
So this is there is a more zoomed in. So that's a more zoomed in one of the existing window. So you can see that's got reflective screening, a film on the windows. Mm-hmm. And then below that, I think that's also obscure glaze. So I don't think any of it is clear at the moment, but the proposal for the commercial would be for that to go back to clear glazing, as far as I'm aware, but then this would be the residential, so this would then be obscure glaze at lower level, so people can't look into the residential space, but clear at the top level, so they have outlook from the lounge area.
And come back, it says the 3 lower window panes within the arch windows, plural, so that implies both those, there are 2 arch windows, yeah? And you've just said it would be the residential one.
There's 4 in total, so you've got the 2 on High Street and 2 on Harger Street.
But this one says the ones facing Harger Street, which It implies that both windows, the lower side would be obscure glass. You've just said the residential one. Could I have clarification on that, please? Condition 6.
So on this plan here, which is the proposed elevation, it's just showing the residential windows. So we've got, oh gosh, I think that does actually say clear. Sorry, that actually does say, sorry, yes, this says clear at the bottom, and then it looks like it says it's obscure at the top. Sorry, I thought it was the other way around.
It's the other way around. I mean, if it quite clearly says windows, not window, facing Harder Street, and the windows serving the bedroom of flat 1 should be... Because so I'm a bit confused which is actually which then. But my follow-up question was going to be, as this is a listed building, do we assume those panes will be single pane rather than possibility of having sealed units? Because they're pretty big windows just to have single glass. Listed buildings you don't normally put in sealed units.
Councillor Wing, did I see you? I did. I thought I had. Would you like to, just while we get some response, would you like to speak?
I think if you see what they did with Sports Direct on Queen's Road, you know, fully support big buildings being residential above and maintaining smaller retail units below. It's the way to go if we're going to address our problems, and it'll also help a town centre transition, go through a period of transition. But the only issue I can see with this, and it is because I know this street, your streets in your ward, and our streets in our ward where we've got seagull bags. I mean, I know the High Street and Hardress Street are already blighted by seagull bags on bin day and beyond bin day when they're not taken in. So you've got 6 flats and 1 shop. Was there a place for the waste to be kept?
Yes, that was on, oh sorry, wrong way. That was back here, so this was the cycle store at the back here, and this was the refuse store. So you went in through the external door of Hardress Street, and then you've got an internal door here which leads to the waste location there.
So that issue's addressed. I saw the original plans, and I just felt losing that shop couldn't happen. So it's nice to know that the developer has put that shop back, and it's a smaller shop. So I can't really see a problem with this. Is it within the sustainability zone, which is TP 06? I can tell you, because Adrian Verrell sent me the map because I was quite interested in it, that it runs along Hardress Street. So are we assuming, because if we assume, as we do with wards, you know, it goes up Harbour Street, and on that side it's Eastcliff, and on this side it's Central Harbour, this would be outside of the sustainability zone because the line goes down the middle of the street, or does that line include both sides of the street?
So it runs down, the building is not within the area where car parking isn't expected for residential dwellings, which is the policy they're referring to. Because of where this is directly adjacent to that and its town centre location, we obviously wouldn't assume and wouldn't expect car parking to be provided. So whilst it's outside, it is obviously adjacent to it. So we wouldn't try and obviously as a listed building with the structures that are there, you just can't get car parking in there. So, but we do think this is the sort of location where we would want to get, you know, residential dwellings. So we're not concerned about the amount of car parking or lack of car parking.
Do you want to come back, Councillor Matterface?
Can we come back?
Yeah, so
Right,
we
okay,
do
yeah, we're
have
going to
that.
come back.
Sorry, it was because it's so tiny, I couldn't actually read the writing on it, but it says frosted glass on the lower part here. So the condition is correct that this part here at the lower part is frosted glass, and then of these three windows, which are the bedroom windows, that's got frosted glass on, I think it's the whole of those windows is frosted glass of those three there. So this would be the clear part of the lounge, of the arched bit.
What about the window, the arch window for the retail unit?
Well, there's no annotation on the plans for that. I believe it would be clear, but there's no annotation to say. So it could be left as it is, which, as you saw in the photos, they could just not touch it, which, going back to these, that's that one there. So it could be just left as that, or it could be they replace it and put clear glazing in. No, all the windows would be single glazed, and they're metal framed, so it would be single glazed within the metal framing.
Do I have any other speakers? In which case, we will now put the motion for the officer's recommendation for approval to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried. Thank you. Right, so thank you. Moving on to the next item, which is item 5F, application for deferral. Yeah, I know. Thanet District Council Depot, Piermont Park. This is where we had to take a little pause whilst the three members who have declared an interest leave, and so just bear with us for a minute. Thank you.
Is this all right?
Not yet. Can you turn the mic off? Okay, we have three speakers for this item. So first, speaking for the application, Mr. Alistair Hume, you have 3 minutes.
Good evening. I'd like to start by emphasising the site is a brownfield opportunity comprising existing outbuildings and hardstanding used for past commercial uses, which has been vacant for some time. Previous commercial movements in relation to the offices and nursery use were frequent, utilising the existing access, which will also be used to serve the 4 residential dwellings put forward by this proposal. The site is located at the most eastern end of Piermont Park, close to Broadstairs High Street, and is therefore a sustainable town centre location. It is surrounded by existing residential properties and is visually enclosed by established tree screening to the site boundaries where it adjoins the park. Piermont Park is designated and protected as local green space by the local plan, but the application site itself is separate to the park, and there has been no past public access to it. Due to its commercial use and brownfield status, the site is not covered by the park's open space designation, and therefore represents a windfall development opportunity where the principle of development is supported by policy. The application site is located outside of the conservation area, and the proposed layout retains as many trees as possible around the perimeter of the site, which separate the land from the surrounding dwellings. Biodiversity net gain targets will be achieved through additional tree planting and landscaping within the main park itself. This has been accepted by KCC Biodiversity and will also be secured by appropriate planning condition, and I believe is a benefit to the park itself. The application is for an outline permission. The proposed design is illustrative and the detail will be subject to a later reserved matters application. However, the illustrative elevational treatment we have prepared is supported by the planning and heritage officers of TDC and will be a guide for the future house builder who develops the site. The proposed layout also orientates the two-storey terrace at right angles to neighbouring dwellings to minimise overlooking in these directions. The proposal includes a bungalow to the rear of the terrace block, and that's because of the length of the overall plot and the desire to use the land efficiently. The bungalow is single-storey in height, with the massing reducing in this portion of the site to reduce the visibility of the dwelling, which will also be largely screened by the boundary trees and the frontage terrace. The applicant has engaged with the Council's Planning Department through the pre-application process, and initial feedback we received has been incorporated within this submission before you. For these reasons, we hope you will support your officer's recommendation for approval of the application. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaking against the application, Mr Robert Darg, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, this application is invalid. It does not meet the legal standard required, as it fails to demonstrate how the application site connects to the public highway, and that may also explain the wholly inadequate response from TDC Highways Department regarding highway safety. The application contains a confusing and inconsistent mix of references to the number of stories specified, and this is wide open for abuse by a developer. The illustration shows 3 two-storey dwellings with conversion of the eaves. This is very different to the 3 three-storey dwellings applied for and deceives the reader as to what will be built. 3 stories are not in keeping with the appearance of neighbouring properties, many of which sit on lower ground than this site. This proposal intimates that a private access road will have to be installed. There has been no public consultation regarding the intention to appropriate part of the protected park for a private road with additional lighting. This is unacceptable and not in the public interest. In view of the large number and range of public objections, any items listed as recommended for deferral and delegation and as reserved matters should instead be closely scrutinised in public by councillors and not left to TDC planning officers to decide, as they are of significant public interest. The application requires residents to drag their waste to the boundary of the park and public highway for collection, far in excess of the 35-metre maximum distance under LABC guidance. And 4 to 8 wheelie bins and food bins would be left at the park entrance each week, causing an obstruction of the vehicle access to the park and/or the pavement, creating risks to pedestrians. There will be at least a 50% increase in noise and disturbance for neighbouring residents, as they would have close neighbours on 3 sides instead of 2. The former depot actually created occasional noise during Monday to Friday, with very few vehicles visiting the site. This proposal could result in noise and disturbance from 22 additional residents, their guests, 4 residents' vehicles at least, and delivery vehicles, etc. on a 24/7 basis, creating additional pressure to on-street parking and significant conflict between vehicles and pedestrians within the park. The ecological impact assessment is inadequate under the current legal requirements. The established pond within the site isn't mentioned at all, and the reptile surveys were carried out at an inactive time of year. The application shows a 23.74% loss of biodiversity within the site if developed, which is far below the 10% net gain required. And finally, this application demonstrates prematurity. It is irresponsible for TDC to sell land assets for housing development when TDC will cease to exist in the short term and won't be the body responsible for ensuring compliance with planning regulations. TDC's assets rather should be safeguarded for the future when the structure for local governance in Kent is better known. Thank you.
Thank you. And speaking under Council Procedure Rule 20.1, Councillor Kay Bright, you have 3 minutes.
So I'm speaking tonight as a councillor for Viking Ward, who spent the last few weeks listening to many Broadstairs residents of Piermont Avenue who are strongly against this development. I do acknowledge the application demonstrates the council's commitment to prioritising the development of brownfield land. I also believe that if approved, any subsequent sale of this land will yield significant income for this council, which is already under financial pressures from unprecedented levels of demand due to the need for temporary accommodation. However, I don't believe the parking provision will be adequate on this site, especially given the paucity of parking in the surrounding streets. Given the likely value of these homes when eventually built, it's highly likely that each household will have multiple cars. The point of the waste collection has also been made. Entry and egress from the site is complicated, running from Piermont Avenue and through the park itself. Given that traffic volume will be in excess of that generated by the depot's previous use, I'm concerned about the safety aspects for pedestrians and park users alike. I've also have doubts about the proposed removal of any trees. There are several mature specimens on site, and the plans indicate that these might be replaced with hedges. As anyone will tell you, the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago, so this doesn't bode well for any net gain in biodiversity. My objections to this application is also with the council's ultimate goal of securing the application, which is to dispose of the site. This depot was formerly used by TDC technicians as a nursery to provide plants for Thanet's parks and open spaces. Until recently, budgetary constraints meant our parks were sadly neglected. Thankfully, the care of Broadstairs open spaces has been taken on first by the volunteers of the amazing town team and more recently by the town council gardening team. And anyone who's visited the town recently will have seen the huge difference their fantastic work's made. These teams currently have no storage facilities or nurseries of their own, and I support the Town Council in their desire to take on the site and put it to the use for which it was originally intended. It could, and in my view should, continue to be a valuable community asset. Circumstances have changed since this application was first made. I believe the pending reorganisation of local government means that we should not be making decisions on potentially valuable local assets that might have a long-term negative impact on Broadstairs. It's in that spirit that I ask members to refuse this application and force us Cabinet members to have a rethink. If I've got time, Chair, I'd also like to remind and reassure members of the public that what's being discussed this evening is not the disposal of the land adjacent to Piermont Park, but whether any development on the land has merit. If this application does succeed this evening, no decision on the disposal of this land can be made without first going to TDC's overview and scrutiny panel before going to the Cabinet. The arguments I've made today about the future use of this land can still be made at that stage.
Thank you. The Principal Planning Officer will now outline the report.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the site outlined in red here. So this is Piermont Park. This is Piermont Hall in this location here. You can see Piermont Avenue, which runs around to the northwest and south of the site, and existing residential development surrounds the site itself as well. The site forms the former depot and is currently not being used, redundant use, but that's the extent use of the site. And you can see from the photos, this plan and future photos that there are existing buildings on the site. And on this plan as well, you can also see the existing access from Piermont Avenue to the site itself. So here is an aerial view of the site. So this is the site in the centre of this view here. So this is the existing single-storey buildings within the site. So it is considered to be a brownfield site within the urban area. So in terms of the principle of residential development on the site, that is considered to be acceptable in accordance with policy, subject to obviously the other considerations before you. So you can see surrounding residential properties are mainly detached. They're all two-storey properties. You can see this is the park. This is over here again is Piermont Hall, which is Grade 2 listed. So consideration needs to be taken as to the impact on the setting of that building. But there is a distance of at least 70 metres between the site and the building itself. And you can see a number of trees that are currently within the park area and then within the site itself, running along the southern boundary and the western area of the site as well. And then a closer view of that. So again, this is the existing buildings within the site. The access is in this location here, and this is the existing parking area. And again, you can see a number of trees within the site. And then again, a view from the south looking towards the site, a bit more of an angled view, and then from the north looking back at the site as well. So these are now some photos. So this is a photo looking at into the entrance of the site. So there's currently gates leading into the area. So you can see these trees are within the site. These run along the southern boundary. This is the existing single-storey building within the site. So this would all be demolished. So you can see there's no sort of historic value to these buildings, so the actual demolition of these buildings is considered to be acceptable. It's quite hard surfaced in some parts of the site, mainly to the front area of this site, and then more to the rear it's soft landscaped. So running along the southern boundary, these are the existing trees. So the proposal includes the removal of this tree here and this group of trees here. And then again, this is now further into the site looking back. So this is that same tree in that location here. So this again is the southern boundary with the neighbours. And this is some of the neighbours to the south of the site. So this is the boundary looking towards the neighbouring properties to the south. And this is now looking towards the west of the site. So you can see there's a number of trees within this area, and this area is a bit more soft landscape. So these trees would be looking to be retained. And now this is again further back, but looking towards the western boundary. So you've got the southern boundary here and the western boundary here. And this is inside the site. And again, the building on the right to be demolished. And then again, a closer view of that building. And now from outside the site, this is the access in. So the site is in the distance here. So this is the existing access from Piermont Avenue into the site. And now you can go in here. So again, this is the existing access leading towards a gate area here. And then this is the existing parking area. And then the first photo you saw with the gate, that is the gate that's in that location there. So the site consists of everything beyond this gate here. So this area here would remain as the parking area to serve the housing. And then the new development would be in this location here. And then just a view again, so this is looking towards the site. So again, this is the site here and the entrance into the site here. This is the neighbouring property, number 1, Piermont Avenue. And then a further out view. So again, the site is beyond this fenced area. And again, the neighbour to the north is here. This is Piermont Hall within the site, so the Grade 2 listed building that's within the site. So just so you can see sort of the design of the existing building when seeing the plans later on of the illustrative design. And again, this is another part of a ancillary building within the Piermont Hall curtilage. And then the site itself is off to the left-hand side here. So in terms of the policy, the main part of the site is an undesignated area. The access road running into the site and the parking area lie within the policy regarding open space and green space. In terms of the actual use of this area, this will just remain as existing. So this remains as parking. So there's no actual change to any of the site within the open space or green space designation. Everything is beyond that in an unallocated area. So this is the existing block plan showing the existing single-storey building, and again you can see the trees currently within the site. And then this area here again is the parking area as existing with those 2 gated areas that you saw, and then the access road running onto Piermont Avenue. And then again a view of the existing buildings, so again the existing buildings, and then this is the proposed layout. So the application is for 3 terraced units in this location here and 1 bungalow to the rear of the site here. The application is in outline form. It's for access, scale and layout of the development. So the only matters reserved are landscaping and the appearance of the buildings. In terms of the layout, so the site is surrounded by residential. So whilst the concerns that have been made linked to some issues to do with noise and disturbance from the use, but clearly it's a residential area surrounding the site, and this would be a residential use which is compatible with the surrounding area. In terms of the actual units themselves, so again, whilst the surrounding area is mainly detached and semi-detached units, this development wouldn't necessarily be viewed in the context of the surrounding area, because as you saw from the photos, you mainly would be seeing the site from within the site itself, and it's mainly going to be seen in terms of the context with Piermont Hall, and would be having its own separate active frontage into the park area itself. So the block of terraced in itself isn't considered to be significantly detrimental to sort of the surrounding pattern of development. In terms of the bungalow, it is expected that something smaller scale is necessary to the rear of the site in order to reduce impact on residents and to make sure there's nothing too dominant to the rear of the site. So in terms of this layout, obviously you can see there's spacing to the boundaries on both sides. There's quite a spacious garden area serving each of the units, and the parking area to the front providing parking spaces, so 1 space per unit to each of these terrace units, and then 2 parking spaces at the rear for the detached unit. So again, just in terms of, sorry, that was just showing you again the proximity to the listed building, although I did cover that earlier. So then just a more detailed view of that layout. So again, you can see this is the retention of some hedging along or new hedging, sorry, along the southern boundary, although landscaping will need to come in as a future reserve matters. These trees here to the rear of the site are being retained. And then you can see there's the gap with the access to the northern boundary, and again an area of amenity space to the south here. So in terms of the scale of the building, so scale is being applied for, the description says 3-storey. We usually would use that to describe a building that has accommodation at roof level, so that there is accommodation over 3 floors. So whilst it's described as 3-storey, it would be 2-storey to eaves level, with accommodation within the roof space, as you can see within this illustrative plan, which is showing a single dormer at the front and a single dormer at the rear, just to provide some accommodation at that roof level. So any future reserve matters application for appearance would have to comply with this scale, with only 2 stories up to eaves level. In terms of this illustrative design, so discussions have taken place with the agent about this. It was considered that a very traditional design was necessary given the proximity to Piermont Hall, which is why this design has been proposed, which is showing a parapet wall with pitched roof behind, traditional sliding sash windows with seals and headers. So this is the sort of design that we would be expecting to see as part of a future reserve matters application, as this character is considered to be in keeping with the existing listed building on the site, and sort of represents a traditional building that would potentially be like an acceptable curtilage building within the park. So that's the design of those. But again, as I say, they are illustrative at this stage. This would be the side elevation. So at the moment, this is showing side windows at first floor level. But as you see, within the conditions that we've proposed, we would be looking for any future development to omit any first floor windows in order to avoid overlooking or a perception of overlooking to neighbouring properties. This would be potentially the floor plan. So this shows how the size of the unit could be achieved. So with living accommodation at ground floor level, 2 bedrooms at first floor, and a single bedroom within the roof space with potentially an ensuite. So again, you can see the 2 dormer windows, one to the front and one to the rear, that would potentially achieve that space. And then this is the bungalow to the rear. So again, we can't just go for a standard bungalow design, it has to look traditional. So again, this is currently showing a parapet with the pitched roof behind, so it's quite a modest height building, quite limited in height, so similar really in scale to the buildings that are currently on the site, but again would hopefully be quite traditional in its appearance, with sliding sash design windows and interesting design details around the doors and windows. So again, this is just showing side windows and the rear, and then potentially what you would get within the space. So 2 bedrooms within that space, achieving quite a good sized bungalow. So, so in terms of the impact on neighbours, consideration has been given to the proximity to neighbouring properties. So the closest property really is number 1 Piermont Avenue in this location here. So that's quite a large property. We've got a large spacious garden around it. Many of their habitable room windows appear to be mainly on the side elevation, although there are some windows within the rear at first floor level, and this is a conservatory in this location here. So in terms of distance to that property, it's 4.3 metres between the side elevation and the boundary, and then 10.2 metres to that property. As you can see from the section plan that's also been submitted, the site itself is on a slightly lower ground level than 1 Piermont Avenue, so approximately 1 metre lower than the ground level of number 1. So in terms of that distance, it's considered that distance would be acceptable to prevent any significant impact on light or outlook to that property. And as I said earlier, with the windows, there would be a condition preventing any windows within that side elevation, so no overlooking into that garden area, or equally no overlooking into the garden area of number 31 to the south. In terms of the distance number 31, that's 19 metres. So again, that distance is considered acceptable to prevent significant loss of light or outlook. And this is the bungalow here. So again, single storey. There's a distance of 12 metres to the nearest property. But again, at that height, it's not considered that that would result in any significant harm to neighbours. In terms of highways, so highways were consulted, but because this is a private access, they initially didn't provide any comment. So because we have had a number of objections from residents, I did approach highways again and ask for another view just to check that they were happy in terms of the proposed use and how that relates to the existing use on the site. And they are of the view that with the former depot use, I mean, we don't have any evidence of exactly how many vehicles would have used that at any one time, but this is only for 4 dwellings with 5 parking spaces. It's not considered that that's resulting in a significant intensification of that use that would really warrant a highway safety reason for refusal. In terms of the access, this is an existing access that leads to the site already. So whilst there will potentially be some conflict with pedestrians and cyclists, that's an existing situation. Again, it's only 5 vehicles that would potentially be entering the site, 1 or 2 times a day. So it's not considered again that that's significant enough that we can argue that there's a severe impact on highway safety or pedestrian safety as a result of this development. In terms of parking, a number of objections from residents raised concerns with parking provision and said it wasn't meeting guidance, but KCC have recently changed their guidance. For developments on the edge of the town centre, there's only a requirement for 1 parking space per dwelling and then 1 visitor parking space, and this proposal, this layout does achieve that, so that this is in accordance with the guidance for parking provision, and they can achieve cycle parking within the gardens as well. In terms of biodiversity that was mentioned, so yes, they did submit a metric for the biodiversity net gain, and it has proven that they can't achieve 10% biodiversity net gain on site, but the alternative is that this could be achieved on an alternative site, and this would have to come in through a condition that would require them to look at a site that's on the National Register for BNG, so that would be dealt with through that process. In terms of ecology within the site, they have carried out bat surveys and reptile surveys, and KCC Ecology have raised no objections to that. In terms of lighting, we would look at any details for lighting as part of the landscaping reserve matters. And then considering the trees, so that is another issue that is a main concern of residents. So this is the tree protection plan that's shown. So you can see that the trees in green are being retained. This is the area that's resulting in the loss of trees. So we've got, in this location here, this is a field maple, which is the largest tree to be removed. And then there's a few silver birches. So we've had our tree officer onto the site to look round at the trees. None of the trees are protected with a tree preservation order, and the site isn't within a conservation area. So currently none of these trees are protected. Looking at the trees, in terms of amenity, obviously there's lots of trees within the park at present. So in terms of the amenity of these trees, it is considered it's lower than potentially some other trees within the park. A lot of these trees are towards the rear of the site and only really visible from surrounding residential properties. So when considering whether we should be TPOing a tree, we have to look at the amenity level of the trees and the quality of the trees. In terms of the trees within the site, the tree officer has said that they're generally in a poor condition with structural condition or poor form, and some of them are quite young as well, so easily replaced, and he hasn't considered that any of them are particularly worthy of a TPO. Again, the largest field maple, he said, has been, because of the other trees in this location here, have resulted in quite an unbalanced crown. So if these were to be removed, then you end up with such an unbalanced crown that quite a lot of the other side would have to be removed as well, which again is going to cut back quite a lot of the tree and reduce its amenity value. So given the proximity as well to any development on the site and to the boundaries, it's considered that there's already some pressure anyway from surrounding development that could be put on the trees. So it's currently not considered that any of the trees are worthy of protection through a tree preservation order, and therefore it is considered that the loss of these particular trees at the front could be justified, as long as through the landscaping plan that there is some replacement hedgerow along the south and potentially other tree planting to replace this tree planting within the site where possible. And then we have a tree protection plan which is showing fencing around the trees, so during construction works the existing trees would be protected. It's currently not proposed that we would be putting a tree protection order on the remaining trees, although we could look at that if members felt that was necessary. And then in terms of the SPA contribution, so the application is deferred, not because we're seeking a unilateral undertaking, but because it's part of the council. We would be looking for a transfer of the special protection area contribution to the planning team, and so subject to that and the safeguarding conditions being dealt with, it's recommended for a deferral. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I move that the officer's recommendation is adopted. Would the Vice Chair please second?
Seconded.
And Councillor Matterface, did you indicate just now? So, Councillor Matterface for...
So I have got some concerns. Did you put your hand up first?
I didn't, no. I've only just put it up now.
Oh, I didn't actually have my hand up. I was just holding my pen because I've dropped it. Okay, obviously living in Broadstairs for over 50 years, I'm very familiar with Piermont Park. I calculated there are 6 access points to the park, of which this is one. I'm very concerned about the impact on use of the park because, as has been said, when the depot was there, it was used by the people who swept Broadstairs High Street. They kept their barrows there. They collected their barrows in the morning, went down the high street, did their work, took their barrows back, and that was the end of the process. Obviously, at some point, the refuse had to be collected. This is going to have 5 houses with 1 parking space per house. You were saying about there would only be maybe 1 exit in the morning and 1 coming back in the afternoon. I doubt that very much. We all know, those of us who live in Broadstairs, it's practically impossible. Even though I personally don't drive, it's practically impossible to find anywhere to park easily, particularly in Piermont Avenue. I'm very concerned that this will put great pressure on all the side roads around there. I'm also not very happy about the trees. Mr. Hume said they would retain as many trees as possible. I don't find that very satisfactory. And the fact there is no TPO on any of the trees, I do find slightly surprising. I'm assuming some in the park have, but not these that are on the periphery. They're going to be taller. They're going to be taller than the houses around. They're going to have a massive impact on the area. I would like to see a photograph of the actual access to the park. Is it possible to show it in conjunction with the access to the existing site? I mean, I'm glad it's a brownfield site that could be used, but I'm just concerned at what is proposed for it. Excuse me. Yeah, so that access is normally pedestrian access because vehicular traffic goes in the one a little bit this side, sort of about where that silver car is. But you will have cars going in there. Obviously, the 5 houses will be served. That is the access. Interesting, the cross-hatching there, which I think normally means no vehicles. No, I have got a lot of concerns. I've said them, and listening to Councillor Bright, he's raised a lot of the points that have been raised. So I'll now finish, have a drink of water, and pass over to Councillor.
I have Councillor Garner next, and then I also have Councillor Huxley-Makinson and now Councillor Wing. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. I've got a number of concerns about this. I'll start with where Councillor Matterface finished with the access. That access, I mean, obviously I'm very familiar with this area. That access, I'm confused how it will become a road, basically, because you'll have 4 or 5 households accessing it as often as they want to in 1 or 2 cars. You'll have delivery drivers coming in at any time of the day. You know, even your Amazon and your Just Eat and all that sort of stuff. There'll be so it's just not a road. And when we talk about, I'm sort of segueing into talking about it being a brownfield site, that bit beyond the gate into the depot, yeah, that is a brownfield site. The park isn't a brownfield site. and the access is part of the park. I mean, it was, when it was used as a depot, because there were the odd truck going in and out that the depot people used, but not constant access through cars. This is, as far as I can see, totally inappropriate for cars and vans to be driving in and out. One point that was sort of mentioned briefly was about the bin presentation for on 1 day a week for collection. So we're talking about householders walking with their bins 35 plus metres to put them somewhere on that pavement the night before and then be picked up. It's a long way to lug your bins and your cardboard, and it's also going to cause a blockage, especially when there will be people driving in and out and delivery drivers driving in and out. It's going to cause a major problem, I believe, that I can't quite see how it's going to be overcome. And then there's the whole conundrum about biodiversity net gain and loss of trees. It's almost like biodiversity net gain is going to be impossible to achieve because we're cutting the trees down. If they weren't cutting the trees down, then it wouldn't be as difficult, because you're losing so much biodiversity by losing the trees. It's sort of some sort of loop about not being able to achieve biodiversity net gain. In a way, it makes it an unsustainable site for development, because you can't achieve biodiversity net gain. And two of the trees I noticed on the picture that are going to be impacted are in the park, aren't they? They're on the other side of the driveway, which will be which is why they need to be protected as they're going in and out doing the development. And that's the other thing. That's the only access for vehicles that are needed for the development. You know, the lorries going in and out. I don't think that access will be able to stay like that. And the development and then the ongoing access causes issues which may be considered unacceptable to park users and to park users. So I think there's some of my main concerns. Of course, Councillor Bright mentioned something which is a non-issue for planning, non-planning consideration, but it's still something that needs to be noted. This is a site that shouldn't be developed. It's a TDC-owned site that should be used for the community, as he has mentioned. I know this isn't a planning issue, so I'm not using that in my consideration, but that's something to bear in mind. So I might come back on some issues if anybody raises any that need to come back on. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify with regards to the biodiversity net gain point, because what's been stated is that there'll be improvements. It's been stated that the value of the site has been taken into account, which requires, through the statutory condition, if it was to be approved, that 10% must be provided. If it can't be provided on site, it has to be provided off site. Now, obviously, the council is working on securing its own habitat bank within the district at the moment, but the regulations don't require. We wouldn't be able to refuse the application on the basis that at this stage it's not been demonstrated that it can be provided on site. I understand the point that you're making in terms of the loss of trees creates a more of a negative, but it's actually the baseline on the site at the moment with the reduction does create a greater amount expected to be provided both on site and in this instance likely off site as well.
Thank you. Councillor Huxley.
I actually like this application, Chair. Thank you. In planning terms and legislation, there's no reason to turn it down. Just to remind people that it's an outline application only. As Emma Fibbins has said, It's the deferred matters come later, the details. So this is just an idea of what, we are looking at. We've got an acute housing shortage in Thanet and in the UK, as we know, and we need to build new homes. So this planning application is in line with the local plan for Thanet and the MPPF. So isn't in a conservation area, it's a brownfield site, and it's on the edge of the park, and it's well away from Piermont Hall and the War Memorial. The trees on the site aren't protected by tree preservation orders, as has been talked about, and they are actually in poor condition according to Emma Fibbing's report. The vehicle access is via Piermont Avenue, as we've said, and there is ample parking on site. The houses are set back. Therefore, in my opinion, there's no adverse impact on the park or the local residents, as has been said. So I would be minded to vote to approve this outline application. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Makinson, next, please.
Sorry. I would also support this. I really, really believe that all these little brownfield sites should be used. As Councillor Huxley says, we do need housing. It was mentioned about the scale of the new houses. This gable I can see here on this house, it may only be 2 stories, but it's got a huge gable, so it's probably higher than the proposal for the new 3 houses and a bungalow, so 4 houses, not 5, as people were saying. And I would support it. I think they're sensitively designed. I know that's not the design. It is on that elevation, it is actually lower than the adjacent house, higher than the house on the left. And there's plenty of trees around. So I will support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wing.
I feel very uncomfortable about this. I mean, it's clear that there has been no decision, and these are not planning matters, but they are an issue of council procedure, I believe, because I also sit on overview and scrutiny. So it might be that Charles may have to answer my question, but I believe you cannot call in planning decisions to overview and scrutiny. So I believe there's an element of predetermination in not having a fair call-in to overview and scrutiny about selling this piece of land. In a sense, we are putting the cart before the horse. And I think there are procedural things that need to be discussed before we can even decide any of this, because otherwise this could then be called into overview and scrutiny. Are we then just discussing the land, or are we then discussing the planning application, which may or may not be approved? It's an outline planning application, which clearly has an impact on the future value of the land. So, that's a procedure. We are TDC. I sit on overview and scrutiny as well, and I'm now feeling very conflicted about council procedure. And I believe there should have been a decision about selling the land first, before a planning application was brought before this committee. I want to then go on to Piermont Park and Piermont Hall is listed. And goes with the listed building is a percentage of curtilage. And to me, the curtilage is going to be detrimentally impacted by this development. like people have already mentioned, it's not just, the average number of cars per household is 1.2, so it's going to be more than 6. Then we've got visitors to the household. They will come all day and all night. Supposing we've got shift workers that work at night, they will be coming and going. I just envisage a section of Ellington Park with no clear access, and then suddenly a private road is being used as general access past people's houses and past a park, which I understand is full of people. But I feel very, very uncomfortable. I feel as if I'm being forced into making a decision that will have future consequences for my role when I sit on overview and scrutiny and this gets called in, because we cannot call into overview and scrutiny a planning application. So how does that sit with any future decision about selling the land? I don't know.
Thank you, Chair. So, to the point about procedure, the planning application is obviously what's under consideration this evening. In terms of, as Councillor Bright has already outlined in the 20.1 speech, any decision to dispose of a site has to go through different procedures. Now, in terms of conflict, all members are being asked to do is determine a planning application on its merits. Okay, so we, as officers, can't take into account values to be accrued from sale of land from the council, just like we wouldn't take into account the sale of a private site being sold. It has to be on its merits, looking at the planning matters for consideration. So in terms of the decision that you're making as a sort of person on overview and scrutiny and on this, you're making a decision on the basis of a member of planning committee. What happens subsequent to this, refused, approved, deferred, whatever it is, the other procedures still have to be followed. There is nothing that I am certainly aware of that requires the disposal of land to have been agreed prior to the council applying for planning permission on its own land. It's just there is no regulation or requirement in the constitution for that to happen. So this order is acceptable to do it round this way, and it is about, unfortunately, for members who are in both different roles, having to parcel off exactly what they're considering. So considerations when you're on overview and scrutiny about the disposal of the site are matters to consider then. It may well be that that is in the context of an approved application, a refused application, or no application. But ultimately, the decision before members this evening is on the planning merits. It's not about the sale of the land. As I already mentioned, that's a separate decision. That's not one that members have to account for this evening.
Charles, I'd like the words from our legal officer.
Unfortunately, I'm not the legal officer, and she's not in today, but exactly what Ian has just mentioned is correct, that disposal is separate. A decision on disposal of assets is separate from a decision on planning applications, and those two are separate, and they are not dependent on each other. But then if you want us to put this on hold subject to further legal advice, more than happy to take that forward.
Just like to say they may not be dependent on each other, but there will be consequences of a decision made tonight.
Okay, I need to move on. I've actually got Councillor Uzeki next, and then Councillor Garner wants to come back.
Thank you, Chair. I've looked at this and looked at it as objectively as I can, and in my opinion, which for what it's worth, this site is just going to be overdeveloped. There isn't proper access to it. If there was a separate road going to it, and that, I might have a different opinion. But at the moment, I don't feel that the site is suitable for 4 properties or 5 properties, whatever they're going to squeeze on it in the end of the day. But certainly won't get my approval on this. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Garner, you wanted to come back.
Yeah, well, I was just going to sort of further follow up on the access, because that, as I say, knowing that park, and there's people who've been there when I've walked home from meetings at Piermont Hall, of which I attend a number. In the winter, when it's dark, there is no lighting in the park, and when I say in the park, I mean on that as well, that access point from the road to the proposed development site. So there's no lighting there. So when this is if this was to go ahead, would there need to be lighting put there? There's no pavement along there either. I mean, it's not a road. It's just a path that mostly people walk along. So I would have concerns that there's no lighting there, and there is no path. So people out for a late night stroll, as people do, maybe walking home from a meeting, would be in danger from people driving.
So obviously, as the report outlines, we consider that because there are 4 dwellings here, that it is a low level of movements that are created that wouldn't result in conflict with park users. To the point about in the winter months, one would expect if it's pitch black that cars would have their lights on, I think is one important point. This area that you can see in the photo is also, it's designated for, at the moment, for sort of town council vehicles only, and it's a turning area very clearly next to the bin storage. So there is certainly vehicle movements that could occur right now within that area. So what you're looking at then is the stretch that goes down to the gates themselves, which in itself is a maybe 10 metre long, and that is without measuring, so that is, do take that with a grain of salt, but you will know from knowing the park. And so again, for that stretch, to be able to justify that there's a conflict between vehicles from 4 dwellings with pedestrian movements in the park, it doesn't, unfortunately, I don't think that would necessarily on its own outweigh the benefits of 4 houses, because again, it is a low level of movements that could be conflicted. I agree that there's a point here about pedestrian movements in the park, but because of the number of vehicle movements created and the very specific example that you gave, I wouldn't consider that there's necessarily enough evidence to sustain a point of refusal on that point on its own.
Okay, can I just come back on it just a little bit? Only because it's sort of brought to mind another point really, which is that we're talking about a planning application on a site that is considered not to be in the park, that would be, we call in brownfield. But are we given permission here, or if we do give permission, to just the development on that site, or are we giving permission for this part, which is the park, which isn't, that road isn't on the site, it's in the park. So would we be giving permission for that part of the park that would become the access road to become an access point? So that because it's been said that this is about potentially selling the site. So would this be included in that access point? How if we just sell the site, how does that access point get used?
So the application site, as outlined, and this is a point that's been raised within the public speaking, and it is something that I have just been looking at in terms of just to kind of confirm this point. This is understood in terms of the access point would require vehicles to drive down the route that we've seen. So it's very clear to understand what will happen in terms of if planning permission is granted, and separately, if the site is disposed of and sold, then obviously in terms of that sale, there are currently, one would assume, in terms of rights of access to get to that site at the moment to the depot. So similarly, in terms of rights of access over land, not necessarily within the ownership of the individuals, a right of access could be created for a vehicle to go over someone else's land. In this instance, obviously, it's not proposed to develop on the area, that you can see there in terms of that route down. In terms of the details of the sale, again, separate matter, but the point here is what would be approved is that vehicles, there is a parking area that is shown on the site within the red line, and obviously in terms of everyone understanding how those vehicles get there, it's via the access point that you've seen. So that is what will happen. So in terms of the points that members are making, in terms of vehicular conflict with pedestrians, that's entirely relevant as a consideration, because this is the only way vehicles can get to the site. It's from that access point and down. Whilst there is to the left, as again members in Broadstairs will know, it does actually loop round and you can get into the rest of the park, and it's wide enough to get a vehicle round actually into the area next to the sort of gatehouse and that area. That isn't ultimately used by vehicles, that route. It's just this little area here is used for turning at the moment, there. So in terms of what members are considering, it's the fact that what will be created is vehicles will be going down there to the site. In terms of, this is not in any way, any approval of the planning permission does not approve the sale of the access down to that site. That's not what's in the consideration. It doesn't even approve the sale of the land at all as well. So just to, again, be clear on that point.
Councillor Matterface.
In other words, it could become a ransom strip. I think I heard them say that the actual road from, once they've turned to the right, is going to be a private road, and private roads don't have to have street lights. Is that correct? They don't normally have street lights, so you could have people coming out from these houses, if they're built, coming out of an unlit street straight into that road where there could be pedestrians. So yes, obviously they would have the car lights on, but am I right, a private road would not necessarily have to have any street?
I think the key thing is, in terms of what's being proposed within the application, there's no lighting proposed in that area. So ultimately, in terms of there's no proposals to put, otherwise that area would be in the red line, it would include obviously the lighting details. That's not being proposed.
Can I ask a question? It's coming up from some of the things that have been said about procedure, and although this is Thanet District Council owned land, this is the only reason we're even beginning to think about this, but normally if Joe Bloggs owns the land, we wouldn't be talking about who he might sell it to, whether he might sell it or whatever. But can you just confirm how long, if this is approved tonight, how long this planning permission will exist for before it falls due to not having been started? That's the first half.
So first of all, presupposing that the money is transferred for the SAM's contribution and then the decision is issued, so obviously the recommendations defer for that to happen. Planning permission is then granted at outline stage for 3 years. Within those 3 years, an application has to be submitted for the reserve matters, so for the other details such as the appearance and the landscaping detail. If that is then granted, then the applicant or whoever owns the site will then have 2 years from the date of that reserve matters decision to implement the consent. So the maximum that could be, this site could come forward in technically 5 years from the decision date is the absolute maximum before they have to put a spade in the ground. Obviously that requires the reserve matters to be granted, or separately, the decision is reached on an outline application, a reserve matters application comes in the next day, it goes through statutory consultation, it's approved. Obviously, again, if it happened now, it'd still have to come back to members for reserve matters as we own the site, and then it's granted, and then it starts after any pre-commencement conditions are cleared. So usually it's sort of around 2 years before anything actually happens, but it could be as long as 5 years.
So because we've muddied the waters already, if TDC do not sell the property within 3 years, and bearing in mind what we've already heard, it's got to go through ONS, Cabinet and everything else, then it would fall. So it's still got all of those layers to go through. Or they would have to decide to do social housing on it if they didn't want to sell it for private development.
Yeah, technically, obviously, if the process took longer than 3 years, then the land would be sold without planning permission, because obviously without the reserve matters coming in within 3 years, then it would fall. Obviously, any application for us to do something on it ourselves, any separate proposal, again, would similarly need a planning application. It would still need to, if it was to be used, because obviously this is planning permission that doesn't define what it is, the type of tenure of the housing, but obviously it's, so it's just, but it could be either. yeah, that wouldn't necessarily change it. But obviously, if it falls, then your application would have to come in on that basis.
I mentioned that because there has been assumption that it would be for private sale and private properties, from what I'm hearing people saying. Now, I think Councillor Matterface no, Councillor Wing wants to come back.
I just want to come back because if this was a planning application, and it is our planning application, there's no point in us saying it's Uncle John Cobley down the road. This is a Thanet District Council planning application. It's an outline planning application. So we stand to benefit, and this is what makes me feel really, really uncomfortable about voting for this. You know, and it should have been, in my opinion, the other way round, so that we as a council are not accused of giving ourselves a planning, making a positive planning decision, so that we can then sell on a piece of land at a bigger profit than it would have in the first place. That is what makes me feel really uncomfortable. If this had gone to overview and scrutiny and we decided to sell the land and then the planning application come in, I wouldn't quite be feeling as uncomfortable as I am.
Okay, do I have any other speakers? Oh, Councillor Huxley.
It just seems to me that TDC is damned if it does and damned if it doesn't, if I've got that right. I remember previous application or pieces of land that they've owned and tried to sell without planning permission, and they got criticised for doing that. It's all a bit what's if, what buts, ifs, maybes, perhaps, maybe. I remember some previous applications that various members of the planning committee were complaining that there was too much lighting, potentially, so you can't have it both ways. Let's talk about the planning application, not about anything else surrounding it. As you said, Chair, this is the crux of the matter. We need to talk about planning, not about that we want the site for something else, or, you know, maybe somebody might get run over, possibly going down the road in the middle of the night, down that access road. Thanks.
Okay, do I have any other speakers? It doesn't look like it. So we will now put the motion for the officer's recommendation to defer and delegate to the officers to the vote. Would those in favour please indicate? Those against? And any abstentions? So that falls. Hold on a minute, we'll come back to you. Just bear with us. Okay, so we're actually just going to do an official quick adjournment. We obviously need, as you know, to do an alternative motion to replace the one that has fallen. Is there anyone who wants to come up and just speak to us at the front for a couple of minutes, just so that we can get the wording for that motion?
What if I make a proposal? Anyway, I would like to make a proposal that we refuse permission. Sorry. I would like to make a proposal that we refuse permission for this planning application based on, I mean, you'll have to do the wording for it, but based on the access issues, based on the biodiversity net gain issues, and based on the bin presentation issues as well. And if there are other issues that people want to add to that, then we should do that.
Councillor Garner, I think that's the point of having the adjournment, so that we can actually get the wording for those reasons, rather than, because it needs to be evidenced with the references from the local plan and everything else. So we just need to get the wording right for that, rather than just as you've said. So if we're just going to do a short adjournment, would you like to join us? And Councillor Wing?
I I just ask that we do ask our monitoring officer for a legal situation, because if this had gone to overview and scrutiny first and the decision had been made to sell it, because I accept Corinna Huxley's point on sometimes we've sold assets and then they've been sold on, but it's the wrong way round for me.
Yeah.
I think it should have gone
Councillor
to...
Wing, we will come to that.
But we do need legal advice on that.
We'll do the adjournment and then we can talk about that. So just, anyone else want to come and join us for the wording of the next motion? No, it looks like it's just you, Councillor Garner. Councillor Alban, we haven't finished the previous item yet, so no, we haven't. No, we haven't. We haven't finished. Sorry. No, we've got to do the next motion. Okay, I think everyone is seated and back, except those that can't. So I'm now going to hand over to Mr Livingstone to read the proposed motion, and then we will ask for a proposer and a seconder.
Thank you, Chair. So to defer to officers to provide potential reasons for refusal following the debate and bring back to Planning Committee for decision, including comment from the Council's monitoring officer on the decision-making process.
Proposer?
I'm happy to propose that.
Councillor Garner, and seconder, Councillor Boyd. Thank you. All those in favour, please indicate. And any against? And any abstentions? That's carried. Thank you very much. Right, so now I need to just pause a moment while we call back in the three councillors who had to leave the room. Yeah. Thank you, that's being done. All right, thank you. Welcome back. Oh, no, we're not ready. One of us is not ready. I just said that, you've left your bag behind. All right, okay, so we're now moving on to agenda item 5G, which is application for the Britannia Fort Hill Margate. Public speaking in favour of the application. Actually, sorry, it's in the wrong order on my sheet here. Sorry. Speaking against the application is Mr Julian Stone. Sorry. Sorry for the confusion. It will be Councillor Manners first because he is reading a statement on behalf of the applicant. So my apologies, that is the reason that you are first. It is unusual and not normal procedure. Thank you. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I should just make it clear that I am speaking purely on behalf of a ward resident who's asked me to represent him here this evening because they aren't able to make it themselves. It's from Andrew and Ottilie Cox, who are ward residents in Cliftonville East. We are the owners of the Britannia, which we bought after it failed to sell at auction in 2014. The sellers had purchased the freehold from Whitbread plc after they had made the decision to close the pub. The gentleman who was renting the Brit at that time on a casual basis wished to stay on, so we granted him a new 10-year lease, but he surrendered the lease after 6 months. We now think that the tenant in situ may have been a ploy to make the Brit appear to be a going concern. We then advertised the building to let and found another publican who had vast experience and was also the chair of the local branch of the Federation of Licensed Victuallers Associations, and granted him a 10-year lease. Despite his best efforts, including a £1 Sunday lunch campaign that made the national press and turning the upper floor into holiday let accommodation, the business could not contend with reduced attendance, spiralling running costs, and then, of course, COVID. We reduced the rent initially by half in 2016 And then during and after COVID, we charged zero rent in an effort to keep the landlord and the building going. But in February 2022, the business went into liquidation. We did everything we could to keep the Britannia operating, and it is very distressing to witness people accusing us of deliberately destroying a beloved local landmark. We asked the ex-landlord if he knew some of those who were making these accusations, and his somewhat bitter reply was that none of them had set foot in the pub once. We put the building up for sale, as described in the agent's report, for 2 years, but received no offers from people who wanted to run the pub, only from developers. The cost of maintaining the building is frightening. Utility costs are estimated to be at least £2,000 per month, and the business rates are in the region of £1,500 per month. In addition, the Brit requires an estimated £250,000 to get it up to current standards. The fashion is now for boutique bars, not huge family pubs, and the Brit does not benefit from much footfall, being away from the old town. The closure of the Winter Gardens was a further blow to the future prospects of the pub. We had no option but to think of another solution, and we truly believe that providing quality family accommodation whilst renovating and much improving the exterior at the same time is the only option to keep the Brit alive. Thank you for your time. So that's the end of the statement from Dr. and Mrs. Cox. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Manners. Speaking against the application, Mr. Julian Stone.
I'm from the Thanet branch of Campaign for Real Ale. Firstly, may I reiterate the reason for the previous planning refusal at the Britannia, which was loss of community facility, and linked with this, lack of marketing as a hotel and public house. Nothing has been submitted in this new application that addresses or brings any new light on any of these objections. Perhaps the most striking difference in this application is the planning statement that was validated last year. It mentions that there are 10 nearby drinking venues and goes on to name them, although some of them are slightly misspelt, such as Northern Bell and the Little Price. All these are on or near Margate seafront. Now, Margate has a population of more than 63,000 and rising, plus tens of thousands of visitors every year. 5 of the venues mentioned in the application as justification for the loss of the Britannia are frankly tiny and all at capacity. The Little Prince, which is in the Kent Market, has seating for 10 people and describes itself as the largest minibar in the world. The Two Halves is a micro pub. The Northern Bell has a seating capacity for perhaps 20-25 customers. Others mentioned are of also similar modest size. The inclusion of the Fort Hill Hotel in this list, which is quite a high-end establishment, actually gives a hint of what could be at the Britannia. Now, we're not saying this is true of the developer, but it's noteworthy that some smaller house building companies have absolutely zero interest in running pubs or leasing them out, as it's not their business model. We can ask ourselves, would the loss of the Britannia bring vitally needed new housing with a sea view next to the Turner Gallery, or just result in empty property kept as investment and possible air new and B&Bs? With all this in mind, it's quite correct to continue to state that the permanent loss of the Britannia would be of great loss to the community and undermines the ability of the community to meet its day-to-day needs. We encourage our local authority to continue to sensibly retain, manage and enhance our public houses. In the instance of the Britannia's proposed change of use, it should be declined. Thank you.
Thank you. The Principal Planning Officer will now outline the report.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the application site outlined in red, the Britannia here, and the Margate Police Station next door, and Fort Hill. Sorry, an aerial view of the application site here, and a view looking from Fort Hill back to the Britannia. It's just some photographs, so this is looking at the parking area to the front of the Britannia there, and this is to the rear of the application site. As has been mentioned, members may well be familiar with the previous application that was, I think, heard at April's committee last year, where members did refuse the application on the loss of the community facility and the inability for the local community to meet its day-to-day needs. Further information, this application that's before members now is identical to the previous application, other than there is additional information submitted in terms of the principle of the application, so the conversion, the loss of the community facility. So it has, as been mentioned, identified a number of community facilities that are in the vicinity of the Britannia. So the Britannia is in this location here, and there are several on this slide. Just these are not actually ones necessarily identified by the applicants in their statement. They are just ones that we can readily see on a Google map. So there are a number that, for example, the Northern Bell, and other ones that are in the Old Town and various places around, and they are in close proximity within walking distance of the Britannia. Also, further information has been provided, as has been mentioned by Councillor Manners, in terms of additional information in terms of how the pub was marketed, and it was marketed for 2 years, has been mentioned, and it was marketed to various people in the publican industry, and using various magazines and trade journals, and as well as seeking to secure interest from potential pub operators and hospitality industry professionals. They also did drop the price as well after there was no interest in this. So, and the only interest that has been mentioned, that has been received, were from developers to demolish the pub and rebuild in some form of residential mainly. So it has been considered by officers that the principle of the loss of the community facility has been met. They have gone through all of the 3 criteria in the policy for the loss of the community facility, and if members recall, they only have to actually hit one of the criteria. It is an either or policy, so they are looking at the fact that there are other community facilities very near the site, and also the fact that they have gone through a marketing exercise to quite a degree, and there have been no takers for that. So we are of the opinion as officers that the principle of the loss of the community facility is acceptable in this instance. So just to go through actually some of the other refresh members on the actual proposal you will be considering in terms of the conversion. So this is the actual site plan of the site in its current form. The existing south elevation, east elevation, which is the rear elevation, sorry, this is the rear elevation, and the north and west elevations. This is a proposed south and east elevations, and members will note there is a 2-storey extension proposed in this location here. There were some concerns raised by the conservation officer in terms of the alterations to the building, but she is accepting that they do provide excuse me, a good would help assist bringing the building back into an active use, and they do actually sort of give it a better sort of structure for being used as something rather than the slightly awkward shapes where the building has been extended previously over a number of years. And she does agree that they are relatively subservient in terms of the actual glimpses you would see of them, mainly being located to the rear. So this is the north elevation. Again, you can see the extension in this location here. and that's the west elevation. And there will be alterations to access the flats and change the appearance of the front elevation here, but they are considered to be minor and would help facilitate bringing the building back into an active use. So this is the basement as existing and the proposed basement. So we are looking at 4 3-bedroom flats being created in the pub, or converted pub. So that's the existing ground floor and proposed ground floor. First floor existing, which obviously, as has been mentioned, was habitable accommodation originally in association with the pub, and then it was holiday lets to a certain point. That's the proposed first floor. And it is proposed to provide, looking at the proposed site plan here, it is proposed to provide parking for the units and also an element of space for each of the 4 flats to have a little garden area. It is acknowledged that the front garden areas for flats 3 and flat 4 and flat 1 would not be that private, because we wouldn't expect to see, a wall or a fence or a high boundary treatment there. But it would give them a space and to sit out and enjoy some fresh air and etc. So the Conservation Officer also does raise some concerns about the enclosure and the addition of the gardens to the front, but it is considered that on balance, with the fact that we do have a condition to secure details of boundary treatment and landscaping, and it is envisaged that they would be low-level demarcation sort of landscaping rather than the sort of high boundary treatment you'd expect to see there, that on balance they could be supported and wouldn't harm the character and appearance of either the listed building itself or the conservation area. So the application is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I move that the officer's recommendation is adopted. Would the Vice Chair please second?
Seconded.
Thank you. Do I have anyone wanting to? Councillor Keane first.
Thank you. In the report it says about the TDC waste manager having concerns about the bin and bike storage. So how's that being addressed? And also with the front garden areas, will there be a restriction so people can't hang washing out there?
It isn't proposed to restrict the use of hanging out, washing, etc., in those front gardens. But they would be visible, so I think it would be up to the individuals or occupants of those units as to whether they would want to do that. But I don't think it would be particularly harmful to have washing, a small washing line in those gardens, as they are quite set back from Foothill. So I don't think it would be visually intrusive. In terms of refuse storage, it would be, as I say, each unit does have its small garden area, and it would be brought for their refuge would come forward via the alleyway for the flats 2 and 3, and brought forward and collected from Foothill, as waste would be collected now, and the same way waste would be stored in the garden areas at the front and brought forward. So I think it would be acceptably housed and just brought forward at the day of collection.
Councillor Orban.
I thought it was others. Thanks, Chair. I think for me, we've got to look at what we refused it on previously, and for the loss of that amenity. Now, the decision that we have to take is, have they overcome that? The officer has read out the reasons and what they've done to try and secure a sale or to get someone else in to do it. And I suppose my first question would be to officers, have you got that evidence? Or is that just them, is it just the applicant advising you that, or do you have evidence showing that?
We haven't undertaken a search ourselves, but we have had statements from estate agents and independent people showing us and detailing the marketing.
Okay, obviously that's the main issue really, is that to say that it can no longer be used as a public house, and then we have to have that evidence of that. So if we were to approve that, means that we are trusting them that they that the information that you've given us is correct. So that's for us to decide as to whether that is right or not. But the basis I'm getting to is that if that is right, then that overcomes the reason for refusal on the last application, because there wasn't anything else that was refused on. So that if you believe that the evidence is right, and you have to say you've got to take it on face value, because you can't decide whether that this is wrong or not. We've been given that. So if that is the case, then there is no reason to refuse this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I don't actually have any other speakers at the moment. Oh, I've got two hands going up very quickly, but I am going to finish my sentence, and that was to say that I wouldn't like to see washing hanging out the front. I think it would be a detraction from the amenity, so I support what Councillor Keane is saying. And in line with that, I am a little concerned to make sure that the boundary treatments, and as was raised, I think, by the Conservation Officer, would not produce any loss of view or anything of that property. So I'd like some reassurances on both of those, please.
I'll pick that up. In terms of, first of all, the fence, there is a condition which is a landscaping condition, and the plans annotated identify low-level fencing. Obviously, it is quite important, given that it's within the setting of a listed building, that boundary treatment is appropriate. We're not going to have a close bordered fence around there, even if it is only 1 metre high. So it will also have to have, we'll have to have details of the landscaping that's been indicated on that site plan as well, to ensure that it is attractive, but also not too high to detract or affect the view of the frontage of the listed building. In terms of the point about clothes being dried, it is a balance between trying to provide an element of amenity in front of the properties by providing garden space to those flats. At the same time, part of that does mean that you could have what I suppose I'd refer to as residential paraphernalia. There is no control that we can condition to stop that happening. If we're allowing for gardens, it is not a condition that I think would be particularly past the relevant tests to say you can't put a washing line up, you can't put a thing on, which maybe is a shame, but unfortunately that's, it is accepted that there may be some residential stuff here. Ultimately, it will still be the landscaping scheme will still have to come in, so there will be a metre high boundary treatment, which would obviously mean that there is some blockage of whatever's left in the garden, if it is left in the garden.
Okay, Councillor Bright.
I'm not going to say anything about bloomers. Yeah, let's say it's bread. So I think my concern is really on the amenity use of the pub, and we've heard the reasons. Councillor Manners relayed those ways in which they had tried to market it, they tried to get it to work. I've lived here and for the last sort of 10, 11, 12 years, and I know the building really well, and I've got to say I've never had a pint there. And I've never had a pint there because it's never looked particularly nice and it's never looked particularly welcoming. Now, the George Tavern round the corner and the Rose in June around the corner, both of whom have come through COVID successfully, both of whom have survived the closure of the winter gardens and are thriving and have continued to thrive. They've adjusted to the kind of new reality of what Margate has become and what that particular area has become. I actually think it'd be a real shame if we lose a really great pub, and I've got real doubts about it, because I just don't believe that it couldn't work in this area, because there are pubs that are thriving and that have done well, particularly when we do look down the road and see the winter gardens reopening. So I'm not sure on that kind of, we've really tried to get it to thrive. I don't think it's been invested in.
Councillor Wing.
Thank you. I think we had a similar situation with the pub on the corner in St Lawrence. Was it called the Wheat Sheaf? And I don't know whether it came here or whether it was at Ramsgate Town Council, but I think we were, shocked and horrified that we might lose that pub. But actually, it's been turned into a really good multi-occupancy unit for all their bins are properly stored down the side of the building, and I think we had the same feelings last time this came here, and I think I voted to refuse. But I think I'm where I'm at with that pub in St Lawrence. We decided, we didn't want to lose the pub, but actually it never came back as a pub, and there are pubs around there, so I'm feeling the same as this one. I wish they'd knock it down though and rebuild it so that you can get those gardens from the front. I mean, I'd like to see it more landscaped at the front in a shared way rather than. Is it listed? It is an ugly building, and the only time I've used it is to visit the police station, and I parked there and a guy came out and charged me £5, which I paid him. So yeah, it's never. I've been here since I don't know who the guy was, but he looked after my car, so it was fine. But yeah, I think it's had enough chance to turn itself around. It is a big building, and I think we're moving away from big pubs. The big pubs tend to be the chains, the Wetherspoons, and we're certainly in Ramsgate we're seeing smaller pubs, and I think our towns are going through transition. I won't say that they need. I won't say they're in a poor condition. I just think our towns are trying to find what they're going to be going forward, and I think there is an element, just like the bank, where we've got big units that are not surviving. So I think it's a good use of a building for residential.
Thank you. Yes, I remember it when it was in its heyday as a rock music venue, and I've been there a couple of times, but I don't see it coming back. Anyway, I have Councillor Rattigan next, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's hard, because I understand Councillor Wing's comments regarding the pub in Hurlwall, but this is in a prime sort of spot along Margate. I mean, during COVID, the place was packed along there. It's a hard one. I don't know if I can say, I'll be careful what I say, but I know for a fact that the pub wasn't marketed properly, and I feel that it was perhaps marketed sort of way over the asking price to sort of, and I know a few people that were put off because of that. It's hard, because they say that towns are sort of regenerating in different ways. So I'm sort of on the edge.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points. One is that the relevant policy, which obviously formed the reason for refusal previously, is CMO2. And as Annabelle mentioned, it's got 3 criteria attached to it, of which they, in our view, have satisfied 2 of them, and they only need to satisfy 1 of them. Now, only 1 of them has changed since the last decision that you reached, members. One of the reasons that we do consider it to be okay to lose this community facility is that there is alternative local provision accessible to the local community, and the proposal wouldn't undermine the ability of the community to meet its day-to-day needs. Now, that previous point that it was refused on wasn't tested at appeal, so I can't give you any sort of definitive position on that. I would say, however, that, as Annabelle's mentioned, this is within walking distance of other public houses. You know, that is the case. And I appreciate the discussion last time was around the type of pub it was and the function that it had. However, that's about management, to the case officer's point, that's about who runs it and how they run it, which we can't control through planning. It doesn't mean that it's automatically going to be a live venue in the future. The second point with regards to marketing, the wording of the policy says every reasonable attempt has been made to secure an alternative community use and the site is not viable to provide an alternative community facilities. Well, we have obviously the marketing evidence that has been produced by the estate agent, which gives a rundown of what's happened, including the reduction in price. Now, clearly there may be alternative opinions about whether or not that price was low enough in comparison to the asset that was there, whether or not it had already had enough investment or not. But there is evidence that to go against, we would have to counter at appeal. And we do think there is weight that should be given to the evidence. The weight and degree of evidence, the degree of weight that you give to that evidence ultimately, though, is up to you. But because there are two criteria here that, in our view, are met, that, in our view, is sort of considered to push it over the top to think, okay, we can look at alternative uses. And then, as well as that, it has to be considered by members that this is providing additional residential accommodation in the urban confines when there is an identified housing need, and we must look at the benefits of housing development when looking at the tilted balance in the NPPF. So all of those things taken into account is how we've come to our recommendation to you. Thanks.
Councillor Alban.
Yes, thank you. I think there's something else to look at here, and that is that listed building consent has been granted. And I think that shows that as far as the listed aspect is concerned, that is being looked after. And I think it is difficult, but this will either sit there because you can't knock it down because it's a grade 2 listed building, so no developer's can come in and knock it down. So you've got to look, is it going to be a pub again? And I've been here quite a few times and I've been here, seen bands there and stuff like that. And it was rocking, it was a good place. But times change, and Councillor Weeks right. Not that I normally agree with Councillor Weeks, right, but she's absolutely spot on as far as a bigger place like that is concerned. A place like that can't compete with Wetherspoons because they can't get the prices low enough. And people won't pay. So I think they complied with that. They got over the reason for refusal, which was only one thing, and I don't think we can come up with more reasons for refusal now, because that would just be so wrong. You've got an application come back to you which they've overcome that. So I think as much as I didn't want to lose this pub, and I didn't want to lose other pubs, but as we know, there are hundreds of pubs losing across the country day after day because people are not using them. It's as simple as that. So for me, I think I've got to support this application. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so unless anyone else has got anything new to add, we'll now put the motion for the officer's recommendation to defer and delegate to the officers to the vote. Those in favour, please indicate. That's carried. Thank you. Right, so that concludes the public speaking for this meeting. Before I call upon the clerk to read out the remaining planning applications, I will just confirm that all of the planning applications that remain on the reserve list are the ones for which our cabinet members need to leave. So we will now say goodbye to them again. And you do not have to, and apart from those offering lifts home, you do not have to return. Thank you. We'll just give you a minute or two to get out. Okay, so I'm now going to call upon the clerk to read out the remaining planning applications. If a member wishes to reserve an application, will they please call out as the clerk reads?
Thank you, Chair. We've got AO3, the Old Stable, Hartsdown Park in Margate. AO4, 1 to 13 Churchfields in Margate. And AO5, 57 High Street, St. Lawrence in Ramsgate. And lastly, DO8, Public Conveniences, Eastern Esplanade in Broadstairs.
Can I have a proposer that the applications that have not been reserved be determined in accordance with the officer's recommendations? I have Councillor Rizeki and Councillor Rattigan, so I'll take that as proposal. And second, do members agree? Okay, now we've not yet finished, so we've two things to do. Firstly, for the benefit of the public, I will call upon the clerk to read out the applications that have been determined, so we'll do that next.
Thank you, Chair. It's AO3, the Old Stable in Hartsdown Park, Margate. AO4, 1 to 13 Churchfields in Margate. AO5, 57 High Street, St. Lawrence in Ramsgate. And DO8, Public Conveniences, Eastern Esplanade in Broadstairs.
Thank you, which brings us to agenda item 6, which is an application for approval. On your screens, the Lawful Development Certificate, Jetty Seafood, Broadstairs, Pier Head Kiosk, the Harbour, Broadstairs. Planning Applications Manager will outline the report.
So this is a lawful development certificate. It's coming for members because it's Thanet Council own the building itself. So the test here is not on the merits of the case, but is on the legal test as to whether or not the proposed development would accord with all the criteria within the general permitted development order. In this instance, it's a proposal to put solar panels on a non-domestic building, which is the Jetty building, which members may actually recall we've had before us for applications for different bits and pieces. So the report goes through each of the criteria to outline whether or not it accords with the very specific requirements of the GPDO. We have also got legal advice on it to confirm that in the view of the legal officer it meets the criteria and therefore it constitutes permitted development and it does not require planning permission. And therefore it's recommended that members approve the application. Thank you.
I move that the officer's recommendation is adopted. Would the Vice Chair please second?
Seconded.
Does anyone want to speak on the matter? In that case, we'll put the motion for the officer's recommendation for approval for the Certificate of Lawful Development to the vote. Those in favour, please show. That's carried. Thank you very much. Which brings me to my final bit that says concludes the business for this meeting. Thank you for your attendance and good night.